So back in high school, I was in PE class playing this game called kickball. Now, I'd never really heard of kickball, and I didn't understand the rules, but I thought I could probably figure it out. So they rolled this big red ball to me, and I thought that was some kind of obstacle. So I jumped over it, and then I ran up and I kicked the guy in the mound right in the balls. And the ball crunch was so satisfying. He squealed like a little girl. And then after that, I was just addicted to kicking balls. I ran around all the bases kicking everybody in the balls. Everybody on the playground was just laying on the ground holding their balls. And I thought I was the kickball champion because everybody was calling me Ball Buster Brooklyn. Until the PE teacher ran up and told me to go to the principal's office for kicking people in the balls. So I kicked him in the balls, and then I went to the principal's office, and the principal told me that I was suspended for kicking people in the balls. So I kicked him in the balls too. And then they called the cops, and as you can imagine, I kicked them in the balls, and they were not happy about that at all. So they sent me to jail, they took my mugshot, I kicked the photographer in the balls, and then they sent me to my cell, and I kicked my cellmate in the balls. So then they sent me to the electric chair, and I kicked the executioner in the balls. And then after that, they didn't know what to do. So they called my parents, and my parents came and got me, and my dad said I was grounded for kicking people in the balls and that might teach me a lesson. So I kicked him in the balls. And then they sent me to a therapist to figure out why I was kicking people in the balls so much. And my therapist said it had something to do with unresolved feelings about my mother, so I kicked him in the balls. And then they sent me to a mental institution, and they put me in a straitjacket. But my legs were still free, so I kept kicking people in the balls. And then they put me in straight pants, so I couldn't kick anybody in the balls. And then my parents, and the teachers, and the doctors, and the cops, and Bill Clinton, who was president at the time, they all got together and were trying to figure out what to do about me, because I was a serial ball kicker. And then they decided that they needed to amputate my legs, because I just could not be trusted with legs anymore. So they amputated my legs, and I haven't kicked anyone in the balls ever since. So I pulled up to the Russian mobster house, and they wanted to play pool, and they saw how good I was at pool, because I'm great at it, and then they wanted me and Officer Keebler to be in their district for the Hunger Games. So then they took us to Denny's to get us a lot of food so we'd be full before the Hunger Games, and then they took us to a strip club so we'd get some hose and get our strength up before the big fight. So then they put us in these little tube things, and they raised us up into this big field with all the other district people, and then they said, go! So usually you're supposed to run and grab a bunch of weapons, but I already had my pool stick gun. So me and Officer Keebler just ran into the forest and climbed up a tree and just waited. Then we saw this girl named Cat Piss or something, and she was killing people with her bow and arrow, and oh yeah, she had this boyfriend named Peta. Not Peter, Peta, like how Lois Griffin says Peter. It was weird. And then Keebler sneezed, so Cat Piss was gonna try to shoot us with her bow and arrow, so I shot this bee's nest full of deadly bees with my pool gun, and it fell and hit Peta on the head. So then I shot Cat Piss with my other last bullet from the gun, and she died. So then we just camped until there was one guy left, and Keebler said, yo bro, it's 2v1, let's get him, he's definitely a bot. But I didn't have any weapons or mats, all I had was a chug jug. So Officer Keebler runs up on him with confidence and gets his shield taken off, and the guy starts building Empire State Buildings, and Keebler yelled, bro, he's real, he's real. And then Officer Keebler got sniped, so I was running around, and the guy jumped down and tried to shoot me, but he died from fall damage. So I won the Hunger Games. So I was in 3rd grade, and it was bring your pet to school day, and I brought my pet fish Stinky. I called him that because his tank was always stinky because I never cleaned it. Anyway, I brought him to school, and all the other kids brought their pets. There were cats and dogs and snakes and iguanas, cool pets. All I had was my stupid fish. So I sat down at my desk in front of this kid named Fish Thrower Felix. I was actually the only one who called him that, and you're about to find out why. See, Fish Thrower Felix stuck his hand in my fishbowl and pulled out my fish and said, hey, if you like your fish so much, why don't you go get him? And he threw my fish out the window into the street. And then I looked out the window and saw my worst nightmare coming true. Old Man Teddy came puttering down the street in his monster truck. And I said, hey, Old Man Teddy, watch out! Don't run over my pet fish! But Old Man Teddy couldn't hear at all. And he was blind as a bat, and he couldn't drive. So he ran right over my fish. And he went on to crush 6 cars, killing 12 people, and he crashed into the side of a children's hospital, exploding in a huge fiery mess. It was an honest-to-God disaster. I mean, it was a national tragedy. It was all over the news, but I ran outside, and I held my squished fish, but nobody else cared because everything around me was on fire, and I begged the paramedics to revive my fish, but they just didn't care because they were too busy pulling bodies out of the cars. So I was in elementary school, and we were making macaroni art, and I made a smiley face. And I thought it was the best smiley face you could make as a 3rd grader. So I called the teacher over, and I was like, Mrs. Williams, look! And she gave me a thumbs up. So I was like, yeah, I got a thumbs up, that's me. But then, there he was, Macaroni Jones. He made a dinosaur out of macaroni. Like, I'm talking, it was gorgeous. I thought it was a real dinosaur, his art was so good. And Mrs. Williams saw it and said, "Hey, look, class, look how good Macaroni Jones's art is." And the entire class clapped and cheered, and this one kid even pulled his eyes out and said, "I never want to see anything ever again, because I've seen it all now. I want that macaroni art to be the last thing I ever see." So that pissed me off. So I went home that night, and I got a bucket of glue and a box of macaroni, and I stayed up all night to try to make macaroni art better than his. Then I went to school the next day and said, "Hey, Mrs. Williams, check this out. I made the best possible tree out of macaroni." And Mrs. Williams said, "Very nice, guy." And it broke my heart. Very nice? That's it? Then, everyone heard a honk outside, and we looked out the window, and Macaroni Jones pulled up in his macaroni car. He made an entire car out of macaroni. You should have seen the kid with no eyes. He pulled his ears off after that. He said that was the last thing he ever wanted to hear because it was so beautiful. I even heard Macaroni Jones made his entire house out of macaroni. He even put a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. So I vowed from that day forward to be the best at macaroni art. I never heard what happened to Macaroni Jones after that, but I think he might be the quarterback for the New England Patriots now. So I got stung by a jellyfish last summer. Yeah, I remember it just like it was this summer, but it was last summer. I was at the beach with my wife Karen. She was sunbathing, and all the lifeguards thought she was a beached whale, so they wanted to blow her up, because that's what they do to beached whales. And I was like, no, that's not a beached whale. That's just my wife. And I was making this sandcastle, and oh, it was the coolest sandcastle ever. You should have seen it. And then out of nowhere, this huge wave comes and just wipes out my sandcastle. So I'm like, ass ocean, so I run into the water and I start throwing haymakers, trying to teach that ocean a lesson. But then the problem is I can't really swim too good, and I get caught in a rip current, so I get sucked out to sea, and the lifeguard sees me, but he can't swim either. I mean, what a terrible lifeguard. What kind of lifeguard can't swim? So I'm just out there drowning, and I think I'm gonna die, so I'm looking for any way I can to save myself. And then I see this jellyfish. So I'm thinking, oh, I can just grab onto this jellyfish and ride him to shore. So I grab onto the jellyfish's tentacles, and he starts stinging the out of my hands. So I'm like, ass jellyfish, and I start throwing haymakers. And every time I hit the jellyfish, he's just stinging me more and more. And I'm in so much pain, I'm getting stung by a jellyfish, and I'm still drowning. I'm like 5 feet underwater by this point. And then I see a scuba diver, and he sees me, and he puts his oxygen mask on me so I can breathe, and he takes me back to shore, and I thank him. And as I'm walking up the beach, I step on a seashell, and I'm like, ass seashell, so I start throwing haymakers. And then every time I hit the sand, it's just hurting my hands more and more, and I'm realizing it's because that jellyfish stung me. So then I go back into the ocean to find that ass jellyfish. And then I go out there, and the jellyfish pulls up in a box Chevy with all his buddies, and they start kicking my ass. And they're stinging me all over the place, and one of them gave me a wet willy sting right in the ear. That hurt like hell. So then I get stung up, and it's just a whole big problem. And then finally I'm done at the beach, and my wife won't even take me to McDonald's afterward.